Begin with a gripping hook. I'm standing in the middle of the kitchen, steam from the mug rising like ghosts in the morning light. The air still carries that scent of dried herbs and burnt coffee, mixed with something sweeter, yes, but not for long. It's hard to believe what just happened. It started with a warning, a voice sharp as a knife cutting through the hum of the world. "You're not serious, Drethorne," they called me Dad. Dad, who'd just been fired from the lab for thinking outside the box again. But this time it wasn't just about my lab, it was about what they'd seen of you, your eyes, your hands, the way you'd spent every spare moment chasing that dream. "You're wasting time," they said, "we've got bigger problems." "Bigger? Why not me?" I shot back, though I knew the answer. The dismissal wasn't about your dream, it was about the dream itself, about what it meant to be different. To be seen as too much, too strange, too weak, but then something shifted. The call came in an hour later, a message from a conference. "You're invited." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Yes, this is real. I had been working tirelessly, scribbling notes, testing samples, studying ancient texts. I had dismissed the pharmaceutical world as a zoo of nonsense, but here they were, inviting me, my sister, my brother, even Mom. They knew, they understood. The first week was a blur of meetings, lab work, and the weight of their expectations. They told me I wasn't smart enough, that my methods were unscientific, that I'd fail. But I refused to let them define me. I poured every scrap of my energy into reviving what they had called forgotten remedies. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the doubt would creep in, when I'd question whether I was chasing something real or just a dream. But then I remembered the truth. My family's rejection was never about me. It was about their fears, their need to belong to a world that didn't fit. Now, as I walked through the garden of our old farm, the sun casting long shadows over the soil, I felt it again, the same tension, the same ache. But this time I wasn't the girl who had been mocked. I was the woman who had stood up, begin the painful departure and relentless pursuit. The days blended into nights as I retreated into the field. The phantom of that warning echoed in my mind, but I refused to let it take root. Every dawn I planted seeds they'd scoffed at, each night I studied texts older than their own. The road wasn't easy. There were times when the weight of their disapproval felt heavier than the soil beneath my feet, but I remembered the lesson from their denials. Failure isn't a verdict, it's a teacher. They hadn't told me to quit, they'd simply told me to stop. I thought back to the lab, to the colleagues who treated my ideas as irrelevant, to the countless hours spent questioning their assumptions. That's when I realized they'd underestimated me. Not because I was wrong, but because they hadn't seen the potential. And then one day the breakthrough came, not from a conference or a breakthrough paper, but from a patient, careful observation. A patient scientist drawn to the roots of a forgotten plant, now hailed as a hero by the field. The scientific community, once dismissive, had taken notice. It wasn't just about the plants, it was about the stories they carried. The lives changed by a single discovery. The old way of thinking was crumbling and I was at the heart of it. Back home I felt the familiar pull of the past, my parents' faces, their words, too strange, irrelevant. But I wasn't there anymore. Instead, I was there with them, watching as they saw it, their eyes filled with something unrecognizable, joy, relief, maybe even fear. "Oh," my sister whispered, "you didn't fail." I pulled her into an embrace. The words strung, but here they were, real and raw, the arduous ascension and profound triumph. The days stretched into weeks. The garden bloomed, not just with flowers but with stories. The people who'd mocked me first became my greatest supporters. They thanked me not just for the plants, but for the truth I'd brought back. And with that truth came a reckoning. They confronted me, not with anger but with understanding. "We see now," one of them said, "you've changed." But this wasn't just about them, it was about the world. The pharmaceutical industry, which had disowned me, now found itself watching the revolution I was leading. They'd underestimated the power of persistence, of seeing the unseen. I wasn't just reviving plants, I was reviving a legacy. The botanist who'd been dismissed, who'd been written off, now stood at the forefront of a new era. The triumph wasn't just in the lab results or the acclaim. It was in the smiles of the families I'd hurt, in the quiet recognition that my worth wasn't defined by their opinions. It was in the knowledge that I'd turned their disdain into something noble, and in that moment I understood the true meaning of karma, not a punishment but a lesson, the CATARSIS of return. Now, years later, I stand on the porch of our small home, the wind whispering through the trees. The garden thrives and I walk among its beauty, tracing the paths I once followed. The family watches me, still proud, still watching, but this time I see them differently. They see the woman who came back, not because she forgot her mistakes, but because she learned to forgive herself. When I speak, my voice is steady. Sometimes I pause, letting the weight of the journey settle, and in those moments I realize failure isn't the end, it's the first step towards something greater. My dream was always ridiculous, but it was never about that. It was about courage, about choosing a path that made sense to asterisk me. And now I'm here not as the girl they called a failure, but as the woman who turned their disbelief into discovery. The lesson is clear. What they said about me was never about you. It was about who you were and who you've become. The karma's ledger has finally balanced. I am not just a painter, a game developer, or a weaver of business. I am a storyteller of resilience. And my story, it's one of triumph over doubt, of humility in the face of wonder, and of the unshakable truth that sometimes the most unlikely journeys are the ones that change everything. Thank you. P.S. If you're watching, know this: the world was never ready for you, but it always was ready for the one who refused to be.